I want to take you back to the very beginning, because without that part, you won't understand why I stayed as long as I did. Why I tolerated things I swore I never would. Why I gave chance after chance to a man who thought he'd never find the strength to walk away. When I met him, I wasn't even looking for love. I had just gotten out of a rough patch in my life. My confidence wasn't great, my world felt small, and I was just trying to get through each day without expecting much. Then he appeared. He was magnetic. He had this way of making everyone laugh, of turning heads without even trying. And for reasons I couldn't understand, he noticed me. He looked me in the eyes when I spoke, asked me questions no one else bothered to ask, remembered the little details I'd casually mention. For someone like me, who always felt like background noise, that kind of attention was intoxicating. Our first few dates felt like something out of a movie. He showed up with flowers, held the door open, listened to every word I said like it mattered. We'd sit in the car after dinner, talking for hours, losing track of time. I remember thinking, this is it. This is what people mean when they say love finds you when you least expect it. For a while, it was perfect. We laughed constantly. He'd send me texts in the middle of the day just to say he missed me. On weekends, we'd take spontaneous road trips, blasting music and singing at the top of our lungs. He made me feel alive again. I fell for him, hard. And I believed he fell just as hard for me. The first year together was a dream. My friends would tell me how lucky I was, how good he seemed, how happy I looked. And I was happy. At least, back then. But somewhere along the way, things began to shift. Not all at once. Not in a dramatic way. No, it was subtle. Like a slow leak in a tire you don't notice until one day the car won't move. He started working late more often. At first, I didn't question it. I told myself it meant he was ambitious, responsible. But soon work became the excuse for everything. Why he missed dinner, why he was too tired to talk, why we stopped going out like we used to. Then came the phone. It was always in his hand, always face down on the table. If it buzzed, he'd step outside to answer. When I asked about it, he'd smirk and say, "Why? You don't trust me?" And those words cut deeper than anything, because I did trust him. I trusted him more than anyone. I brushed it off. I told myself I was being paranoid, that maybe I was insecure because of my past. And every time I doubted him, he'd do something sweet, buy me flowers, surprise me with takeout, wrap his arms around me in bed and whisper, "You're the best thing that ever happened to me." And just like that, it'd fall for him all over again. But the cracks kept showing. I remember one evening so vividly, it's burned into my memory. I spent the whole day cooking his favorite meal. I wanted to remind him of us, of who we used to be. I set the table with candles, put on the dress he once said he loved. When he walked in, I waited for that smile, that spark. Instead, he barely looked up. He mumbled something about being tired, pushed the food around his plate, and went straight to bed. That night, I cried silently, lying beside him while he snored, feeling lonelier than I had ever felt in my life. Not because I was alone, but because I wasn't seen anymore. Still, I stayed. Because the next morning, he made me coffee, kissed my forehead, and told me he loved me. And I clung to that moment, desperate to believe it outweighed the night before. That became our cycle. He'd hurt me in 100 little ways, forgetting birthdays, ignoring my feelings, dismissing my questions, and then he'd patch it over with just enough sweetness to keep me hooked. And slowly, without realizing it, I started to shrink myself. I stopped asking for attention. I stopped bringing up the things that hurt. I told myself I was asking for too much, that if I just loved him harder, if I just proved myself more, he'd come back to me. But he didn't. Instead, he grew more distant, more secretive. My friends noticed before I did. They'd ask why I always looked tired, why I always made excuses for him. I defended him every single time. He's just stressed, I'd say. He's working hard for us. But deep down, I knew. I just didn't want to admit it. Because admitting it would mean admitting that the man I gave my whole heart to was slipping away, and that I was letting him. And here's the cruel irony, he knew I wouldn't leave. He knew I was too scared of losing him. And in a way, that gave him power. He thought I would never walk away. And for a long time he was right. I didn't know it yet, but the day was coming when that belief would be shattered. Because even the most loyal heart has a breaking point. And mine was closer than I realized. The breaking point didn't come with a dramatic fight. It came on an ordinary day. I remember it so clearly. I was cleaning up the kitchen when his phone buzzed on the counter. He was in the shower, and usually, I never touched his phone. I wasn't that kind of person. I believed in trust, in privacy. But that day something inside me whispered, "Look." I can't explain why. Maybe it was intuition. Maybe it was the little voice I'd been silencing for months, finally screaming loud enough that I couldn't ignore it anymore. So, with shaking hands, I picked it up. And there it was. A message from her. Not a coworker, not a friend. The words were unmistakable. They weren't the kind of words you send to someone unless there's something going on. The kind of words that pierce your chest and make your stomach drop. Last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about you. My whole body froze. For a second, I couldn't breathe. My hands went numb. The world tilted. It felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. I put the phone down before he came out. My heart was racing so hard I thought he would hear it over the sound of the shower. When he walked out, towel around his waist, smiling like nothing had happened, I looked at him and realized I didn't recognize this man anymore. I didn't confront him. Not right away. Because the truth is, I wanted to be sure. I needed to see how far it went. I needed proof, not just a text message. So I stayed quiet. That week, I watched him more carefully than ever. I noticed how quickly he grabbed his phone when it buzzed. How he smiled at his screen when he thought I wasn't looking. How he suddenly had late meetings almost every night. And for the first time, I didn't believe his lies. Instead, I started preparing. Quietly. Secretly. I opened a new bank account and transferred small amounts of money so he wouldn't notice. I called my sister and told her everything. I packed a bag and hid it at her place, just in case. But inside, I was breaking. Every night, I lay next to him while he texted her, thinking I was asleep. My tears fell silently onto my pillow. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to beg him to stop. But I didn't. Because I knew if I confronted him too soon, he'd twist it. He'd call me crazy, paranoid, insecure. He'd gaslight me like he always did. No, I wanted him to think I was still blind. Because that was my power now. One evening, he came home later than usual. I asked casually, "How was work?" He kissed me on the forehead and said, "Exhausting." I looked into his eyes, and for the first time, I didn't feel love. I felt disgust, pity, and underneath it all, a fire beginning to burn. He thought he'd never leave. But little did he know, I was already gone in my heart. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal. It was realizing how long I had ignored the signs. How many times I'd chosen to believe his excuses over my own instincts. How many nights I'd spent convincing myself I wasn't enough. And suddenly, the shame turned into strength. I thought about every time he dismissed my feelings. Every birthday he forgot. Every night I cried alone. And I told myself, Never again. So I started planning my exit. I made lists. What I would take. Who I would call. Where I would go. And every time he smiled at me, thinking he had me trapped, I smiled back, knowing I was just days away from proving him wrong. But here's the thing. Leaving isn't just about walking out the door. It's about letting go of the version of yourself that accepted less than you deserved. It's about grieving the love you thought you had, the future you thought was waiting for you. I wasn't just leaving him. I was leaving the woman who believed his lies. And even though I hadn't told him yet, even though he still thought he had me deep down, I had already left. The night before everything changed, I lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling, my heart racing with both fear and excitement. I knew what I had to do. I knew tomorrow would be the day. Tomorrow, I would walk away. And this time I wouldn't look back. The morning I left him didn't feel like an ending. It felt like the beginning of something I hadn't experienced in years, peace. I remember standing in the kitchen, pouring myself a cup of coffee, the same way I had done thousands of times before. Only this time, there was no rush to make his lunch, no nervous glances at the clock wondering if he'd be late, no fear of whether he'd come home angry or distant. It was just me. My coffee. My breath. My choice. When he walked out the door that morning, thinking it was just another day, he had no idea it would be the last time he'd see me there. I watched the door close behind him, and instead of sadness, I felt calm. Almost frighteningly calm. I had spent months planning this moment. Moving small amounts of money into a new account. Hiding a suitcase at my sister's house. Pretending to be the same loyal, blind partner he thought he'd always be. And now I was ready. I didn't take everything. Just the essentials. My documents. A few favorite clothes. The framed photo of my parents. Things that mattered. Things that reminded me of who I really was before him. The rest? He could keep it. Because those things weren't worth my peace. When I closed the apartment door for the last time, I didn't cry. Not one tear. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. It was steady. Strong. And I realized I had already grieved this relationship long before I left. The love had died quietly, little by little, every time he lied, every time he dismissed my feelings, every time he chose someone else over me. He just hadn't noticed. Later that night, when he came home to find the apartment empty, I wasn't there to see his face. But I can imagine it. The shock, the disbelief, maybe even the anger. For so long, he believed he had control. He believed I was too weak to leave, too scared to stand on my own. But now, he was the one left with silence. The first phone call came within an hour. Then another. Then another. By midnight, I had over 20 missed calls, 10 voicemails, countless texts. I didn't listen to them at first. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what they would say. When I finally pressed play on one, his voice cracked with anger. Really? You're just gonna leave like that? No explanation. No goodbye. Another message came minutes later, softer this time. Baby, please. Let's talk. We can fix this. I swear it'll change. And then, desperation. You're the only one I've ever loved. Please don't do this to us. But the thing is, he had already done it. He destroyed us the moment he betrayed me. He killed the relationship when he decided my loyalty was something he could abuse without consequence. I turned off my phone. The next morning, I woke up in my sister's guest room. The sunlight came through the window, warm and golden, and I lay there listening to birds outside. It was the first time in years I had woken up without the weight of anxiety pressing on my chest. I didn't realize until that moment how heavy I had been carrying it all this time. Of course, freedom wasn't easy at first. There were moments of doubt, of grief. Nights when I lay awake thinking about the good times, the laughter, the way he used to hold me. I wondered if I had made a mistake, if I had given up too soon. But then I remembered the tears, the lies, the loneliness of being with someone who made me feel invisible. And I knew I hadn't left too soon. If anything, I had stayed too long. I started to rebuild my life piece by piece. I found comfort in small things. Cooking a meal just for me, walking outside without rushing home, reading a book without glancing at my phone in fear of missing his call. I reconnected with friends I had drifted away from. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in ages. I remembered what it felt like to dream about my own future, not just a future tied to his promises. And slowly, I started to love myself again. Because that was the biggest lesson. I had been waiting for him to love me enough, to see my worth, to choose me. But in the end, the only person who needed to choose me was me. He still tried. Weeks passed, and the messages didn't stop. Flowers arrived at my sister's door. Letters slipped into my mailbox. Long, desperate apologies filled with promises of change. But it was all noise. Too late. Because once a woman learns her worth, once she realizes she doesn't need someone else to validate her, there's no going back. He thought I would never leave. I proved him wrong. And here's the truth. Walking away wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning. The beginning of a life where I am enough. A life where I don't beg for love. I choose it freely, and I choose myself first. So if you're listening to this right now, and you feel trapped, unseen, or unworthy, remember my story. Remember that you are stronger than you think. And the moment you decide you've had enough, that's the moment your new life begins. Now I want to ask you, if you were in my shoes, would you have left the first time you saw the signs, or would you have waited, hoping, like I did, that love could change someone?